Okay, thank you. So this is the Town of New Canaan Utilities Commission regular meeting taking place in Town Hall and on Zoom on Thursday, February 20th, 2023, and the time is 7 o'clock. Sven, would you mind?
I'll take the
taking
roll for
attendance?
Jill. Hiram Canton.
Here.
Mike Collins.
Here.
Bernard Clark.
Here.
Sven England. Jill Gazzetti, we know is late. Jenny Hunter.
Here.
Krista Kennan.
Here.
Karim Care. No. Rich Townsend.
He's going to be on Zoom.
Oh, he's on
I
Zoom.
talked to him this afternoon. I don't know whether he's on yet or not, but he's in London.
Okay, Zoom. Zoom noted. Rich Townsend is here. Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Okay. The agenda next calls for minutes. We have a copy of the minutes. I thought I had a copy with me, but I don't seem to. I do. You have one?
We've got one. I think that's it to the chief.
Okay, thank you.
There you
very
go,
much.
sir.
Okay, if people have had a chance to review the minutes, I believe. Is there any discussion we'd like to have on the minutes?
No, sir.
Oh, can we have a motion?
Motion.
Second? Okay, can you write that down?
Yeah.
Jill won't be right now.
Oh, right.
I told Jill I'd fill in for her when she was.
Okay.
Oh, you
both do it.
You got it?
Yeah.
You got it. You got it.
Okay,
No problem.
all in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
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 And you can abstain. You weren't here.
Yes.
Okay, the next thing we were going to do here is, we did have a problem in the last meeting with the microphone not being on for the video. And so we're going to ratify the election of officers. And in order to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read you from the minutes, the election of officers section, and then we'll take a vote on this. Do the people agree, do our commissioners agree that this is what took place? Election of officers. Richard Townsend was nominated to the office of chairman by Kristen Kennan. Krista Kennan seconded the nomination. Mr. Townsend was elected to the office of chairman unanimously 8-0-0. Sven England was nominated to the office of vice chairman by seconded the nomination. Mr. England was elected to the office of chairman. This isn't the final minutes. This is
Oh, it's the draft.
it's the draft. Do you have one? I should have one.
No, no.
You can fill it in from the videotape.
Yeah, no, well, we got it, when it got filed, it had everybody in it. And I thought I had it with me.
Hang on. I made the motion to nominate Rich, and it was seconded by Mike. Kristen nominated me, and it was seconded by Rich.
Unanimous.
Secretary, no,
I
Jill, no, you nominated Jill,
Jill,
and I seconded her.
and all the votes. were
All the votes were unanimous.
Unanimous at 8-0-0, which was the attendance at the meeting. Okay,
That's correct.
You're going to vote to ratify that.
we're gonna
Yes.
vote to ratify that.
We need a motion.
Yeah, we have a motion.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second. Somebody, second, okay.
Second by her.
All in favor?
Abstain.
You got that down?
Yep.
Krista?
You voted?
Oh, yeah. Mhm.
Online.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good to see you, Karim.
Is that a yes?
Yes,
Yes.
Oh, we can hear.
8-1.
8-0.
Then we need
Nobody
to,
had
we
to
also need to.
I'm abstaining because I wasn't here.
Yeah,
last
sure,
week.
you weren't here.
Yeah.
And Jill's not here. And
Right.
Karen's back.
So it's 7-0.
7-0, right. We also need to do a ratification on the schedule, which we approved at the beginning of the meeting. If anybody has the schedule to approve.
They do not have the schedule.
Here it is.
We've been
Good.
involved.
The schedule we approved was June 15th, which was the date of the meeting, July 20th, which is today, August 15th, September 19th, October 17th, November 21st, December 11th, and January 16th.
I'll make a motion to approve it.
Okay, second, someone?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Terrific. Okay.
Jill's here.
Unanimous at 7. Oh, Jill just got here.
So I'll take it.
Okay. Super.
Amy, you were a yes, right?
That was a yes.
Okay, here's your. Thank you. Thank you for the note, by the way. I appreciate it. Okay, next on the agenda is public comments. And for the public comments, those people that are on the Zoom should raise their hand if they want to make a public comment.
No, sorry.
Okay? The list I have has Joe Paulo on it. Joe?
And there'll be a 2-minute limit.
Right, 2-minute limit. Yeah,
Good evening, members of the Utilities Commission. My name is Joe Paulo from Arrowhead Trail. I'd like to talk to you briefly about 2 issues on your agenda tonight. Starting with the possible VCOM study that you're considering voting for. I want to point out 4 facts. First, the study was sourced without competitive bid and to my knowledge, without an RFP. Second, the study is actually 80% less the cost of the study that it's replacing from Centerline, roughly about $10,000 versus about $45,000 to $50,000 for Centerline. Third, I provided Chairman Townsend with 5 emails showing that a conflict of interest exists between VCOM and Homeland Towers, which really should basically make them not a qualified vendor at this point. And finally, why is that important? Because I'm willing to bet that virtually everybody on this committee really doesn't know how to quality assure the data that you will actually get back. It's not like reading an Excel spreadsheet or a graph. And so therefore you have no way to justify or assess exactly the quality of what you get. Each of those reasons is sufficient to disqualify this study. Collectively, I would suggest that you actually take no action to approve it. Second point I want to comment on is I believe your agenda has on it the supposed plan for the town of New Canaan for cell coverage. I want to emphasize to you that the record is clear. There is no plan. The meeting that supposedly took place in August of 2017 to approve the plan has no minutes that show a plan approved, has no agenda that shows a plan is voted on. Also, I can tell you that I will provide you with documents tomorrow that show that what this supposed plan is the Homeland Towers response to the town's RFP. And the RFP was very specific in providing approximately 8 tower sites and basically said these were for demonstration purposes only. And this supposed list of demonstration sites now has been recategorized as a plan. I will send you sufficient documents tomorrow to justify all of those statements. I'm happy to take any questions if you have them.
We can't have a
We can't do
dialogue,
that.
but thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Joe. Anybody else? No?
No one on Zoom.
Okay. Then we're going to go on to the current cellular coverage strategy. And the point here is to get us familiar as a baseline of what the town is currently implementing.
Sure. Good evening. Good to see you all. The reason I printed this out again, I gave a copy to you at your first meeting. You maybe still
did.
have it.
You
This,
did.
this is a rather inaccurately titled document called Cell Service FAQs. It's really Tom Teslick, who was then chairman of the Utilities Commission and had been for 5 years the point person on the commission with respect to cell service. This is his memo laying out the strategy. So despite the title, this is a very important document that you read and reread. And when I reread it, it brought back a lot of memories. You know, back when the Utilities Commission met, I think Sven and I attended virtually every Utilities Commission meeting on behalf of the town council. We were that interested in this subject. And but again, in a how many members? I think there were 5 members of the Utilities Commission at the time. Tom was the only person that had any expertise. They divided their work up, so one person was doing one topic. And so Tom was the cell czar, as previous first selectman had had his cell czar prior to Tom. It had been the name just escaped me. Jeff Picard, who had done it for Jeb Walker. Prior to that, there had been someone else back in the Dick Bond day. Dick Bond did it himself, but every first selectman had a person or did it themselves. Dick Bond accomplished the antennas at the Waving Water Tank. Judy Neville worked on the Country Club Tower. But you know, back then it took 12 or 15 years to get a tower built because people would fight them. And that's why eventually Verizon went away and said, and that, for that matter, AT&T said, you know, we're not going to fight neighbors. We're not going to fight lawyers. If a tower company brings a location to us, we'll consider it. And that's what Tom lays out here, the history of New Canaan and being reactive to proposals rather than being proactive. In fact, his three principles that he leads off with here are saying the town government should play a proactive role in resolving the problem. Any new infrastructure to be built must follow strict design limitations and be minimally intrusive. And there is no one size fits all solution to the problem. So, you know, going through this, Tom recalls how in 2014, Centerline Solutions was hired to do an independent study. Tom was very wary of carrier data, even though the Siting Council relies upon carrier data when they get applications made, which under oath, they're legal proceedings that are brought to the Siting Council. And the Centerline Solutions study did cost about $30,000 because Tom brought them out from Colorado. They had to fly their equipment out, and it was much more expensive than hiring a local regional company. The interesting thing about Centerline Solutions, what they didn't know, Tom Teslick had actually been an anti-cell tower person. He led the fight against the Silver Hill Hospital Tower in the early 2000s. I know that because when I opened the Centerline file last year, John Egan, I guess it was his name, used Tom as a reference in his application in his response to the town. And Tom had led a group called Citizens for Responsible Cell Service. So Tom had a bit of a bias against ugly cell towers. He considered the Country Club Tower to be ugly because you could see it from his home up in Orono Bridge.
Was his whole problem visual, or were there other?
No, aesthetics and well, mainly aesthetics, I would say, knowing Tom. But Tom was a very bright guy. He was a retired Lehman Brothers investment banker. He had financed cell systems in Italy, I believe, in Europe. So he was selected because he had a background in cell, and but he led the charge. You know, we learned a lot from Tom, and I had no problem with Tom's whole process, except it took a long time.
Mm-hmm.
In addition to doing the Centerline drive test, he then hired Cityscape in Florida, which was a RF engineering firm, and they advised him in terms of how we needed to change our P&Z regulations, which had not been updated since the Federal Communications Act of 1996. And that was done. P&Z adopted a whole new set of regulations governing cell towers. And then he also issued the RFP, to which 5 or 6 firms responded, and Homeland Towers was selected. Homeland Towers is a regional development company. They are now sort of part, or you might call them a marketing arm of American Tower. They used to have a financial partner that 2 years or so ago, they switched over to American Tower. So the new tower up in Soundview Lane is an American Tower now.
Is that right? Are they an agent or what? They're not owned by
No, they're an
American
independent
Tower, right?
company, that development company.
Homeland Towers.
Homeland Towers, an independent development company, but they
Right.
have they always need a financial partner because they don't have a balance sheet, and they develop, and they're the ones that, you know, go out and work with the carriers as to where they want to be. One important thing about cell towers is you can't tell them to be there. Because they say that doesn't work for us and we have no interest in being there. They have their RF engineers go out and study and say, you know, we want to be within this ring circle. They call them ring circles when they go to the siting council. And so you can't tell them where to be. You can help them find locations, but they, at the end of the day, they will decide where they want to be. And they don't necessarily agree, AT&T and Verizon and T-Mobile.
Well, Kevin, by the way, everybody feel free to ask Kevin, and quite the whole point is for us to get baseline here.
But I think it's important. Everybody needs to read this document. We can have a further discussion on it, but Tom Lilly did a lot of work summarizing this document for 5 years. And it was a very deliberate process. And then after the Homeland Towers was selected, they came forward with, well, actually in their RFP, they made a specific proposal, which I guess they were asked to do.
Mhm.
That became what I call the plan, despite what Joe thinks. You can, I've referenced, you can look at the video of that meeting in August of 2016, where Rob Malazzi and Nick Williams and Beth Jones listened to the proposal for this plan. So essentially between the strategy, which was documented in August of 2017, and the plan that had come forward from Homeland Towers, that's the plan and the strategy that I've been following, because I followed it all along. I got to know Homeland Towers being on the town council. We met with their attorneys who happened to be, the dean of the telecommunications law practice in this area, who lives in Ridgefield, and Bill Walbert and I had breakfast with the guy, and we learned a lot. So we spent a lot of time learning about this stuff, and Sven and I both sat through a lot of meetings listening to Tom. So the point is that these are the fundamental documents that created the strategy. One question now is, has technology changed? Well, the reality is, as you came through the 15, 16, 17 period, they started talking about 5G because 4G had been around since probably 2008. One thing that changed the world was the iPhone in 2007, because suddenly you had internet as well as phone calls, as well as data. And that changed the world. And they were, and the evolution to 5G was going to be a superhighway compared to what 4G was. The strategy for 5G initially was being discussed as we're going to have thousands of small cells. The city of Dallas was going to have 10,000 small cells. But then something happened. First of all, the cost of that, they realized was not a very good economic proposition. But then they discovered there was spectrum available that had never been used for cable for satellite TV. Some of it was already owned by some people, but in February of 2022, there was an auction by the FCC. The carrier spent $92 billion to buy shorter length spectrum. AT&T and Verizon had been operating up in the 1650 area or so, and T-Mobile and Sprint in particular had lower spectrum. They spent, I think AT&T Verizon spent more than the others, something like $40 billion for Verizon, $38 billion for AT&T, and T-Mobile did virtually little because they already had the advantage of shorter. The advantage of shorter spectrum is it goes farther. So where cell towers historically would go 1.5 miles or 2 miles, this new spectrum was the 5G solution to offer an evolution in much more powerful bandwidth wise in terms of the amount of put through that comes with, but it went farther. So that was an important strategic change. Beyond that, though, the technology remains the same. You need macro sites to create coverage. And then you also need enough capacity to cover the amount of devices calling on your antennas. It's the law of physics. An antenna can perhaps process 700 simultaneous transactions. The next one drops. And when you look at the Waveney water tower tanks, they have all of the Merritt Parkway calling on them. They have hundreds of devices in the high school, Saks, the whole neighborhood down there. There are hundreds of devices calling on these towers. So the reason you might have poor cell service is because, like, if it's 700 transactions, the next one drops. That's where you have poor. So the carriers have an issue with capacity and coverage. In January of 2018, when I took office, Verizon, we asked Verizon to come and talk to us. And they said, Kevin, you missed the boat. You fought us so much with lawyers and neighbors. Our budget for coverage is here. Our budget for capacity is here. You're fighting for so few dollars. And Verizon, after the Puddin Hill episode, where they proposed a tower up on Puddin Hill Road, right on the edge of New Canaan. When they walked away for 5 years. So I was going to ask everybody, take a little poll. I'm a Verizon customer.
Me too.
I used to be a Sprint customer. Why? I've been with Verizon for 15 or 20 years. I'm not sure why. Recently, I got an AT&T phone from the town. And when I go around town, there's a remarkable difference that AT&T has done a better job in the past 5, 6, 7 years because they're on the Country Club Tower. Verizon is not. They did the Silver Hill. Silver Hill actually has all 3 carriers now. They started the Soundview Lane Tower. They started the Northwest Tower. So AT&T has done better job than Verizon. And my theory about T-Mobile is because when we did the survey in 2012, it was like 40% AT&T, 40% Verizon, 15% T-Mobile, and 5% Sprint. Those numbers today, I bet, are probably similar if we did a updated survey. My theory about T-Mobile is they have fewer customers. So the capacity issue is if you're not fighting more people to get on the same tower,
That's better.
you're going to have better service.
Better service. Yeah.
Because you need coverage, you need to get a signal. But then, for example, when people were overdropping or waiting to pick up kids at West School, at certain times of day, you're not getting any signal because the capacity is not there, right? And you may get, when I'm at the Country Club at night and I get a signal on Verizon, because I never get a signal at the Country Club. At night I do, and it's coming from Wilton, 3 miles away.
Wow.
Why
saying-
is Verizon on the Country Club Tower?
When the Country Club agreed to build the tower, there was 8 years of litigation over that tower. They only wanted 2 carriers. They didn't want an emergency generator. They said only 2 carriers. Now, a landlord can, back then, it was before the federal government adopted the policy about co-location. So now if you have a
Right,
tower,
4, right?
they
now.
can come in and another carrier, if there's not already 3 carriers on there, another one can add 10 feet to the, so I've been working for 3 years with the Country Club. Country Club's on board, had Verizon, Verizon's on board, and SBA Towers is focusing only on South America. They could care less about trying to cooperate. So we have not yet succeeded in they would have to put a new pole in because it's too narrow. But that's the kind of thing. That's a problem we have with our coverage because of this historical idiosyncrasies of how the tower was built. So getting back to the idea that the macro site technology is still the world we live in. Now, people talk about new technologies. Elon Musk is out there with 10,000 satellites in the third world countries. Problem with satellites, they may give you a signal. They can't give you the capacity. There's no way in the world satellites are ever going to give you what macro sites can give you locally. And that's the kind of thing you need to understand.
I'm not sure about that.
Okay, well, who said
No,
that?
if you have information about that, well, it would be very useful.
But no, I agree. That's why the idea. Now, there was a big development earlier this year after Apple last year. I forget I forget the name of the company, Linksys or somebody. They
Linksys.
they added to the Apple Watch for the first time 911 coverage, where and now the FCC has adopted a rule that all cell service should become, you can make a satellite 911 call and it'll bring it down to your PSAP, your local emergency center that takes 911 calls. That's a huge development in terms of safety. It just happened in February that the FCC decided to require it. And right now the trouble with it is, people who have Apple Watches, when they go on roller coasters, they think they're getting into an accident. They automatically call 911. So when it first started, 911 centers were going crazy with all these Apple Watches going off. So there was a car accident out in Iowa or someplace where, the phone automatically called 911 when they got into a car accident. So there are technology developments. But my understanding is, and I'd be happy, we really need to understand this, can satellite ever give you the capacity? I sent you an article, I think a couple months ago, where for the first time they had a cell signal from a, what do they call it, a satellite antenna. But the problem is the phone cannot return you can send a signal to a phone, but the phone can't return. So that's the kind of stuff that's going on, I think, with satellite.
The article you sent was, I was very impressed with it. I mean, it talked about using a 4G phone, commercial 4G phone to receive a satellite signal.
Right.
All right. And it was, if I remember right, what they tested was a downlink of 10 megabits successfully. And their next test is going to be a voice thing down and back up. Which I was amazed. I have no idea how they're doing it, but there were 5 articles that covered that test, right?
So, this is an area, again, I don't think AT&T and Verizon or T-Mobile would be paying to put antennas on macro sites if they thought the whole world is going to change overnight with satellite. But that's something we need to understand. We need to have Verizon and the carriers explain to us why they need these sites.
Kevin, who do you use as, who does your technological research? Is it us? Or if it's not us, who is it?
No,
Is it you?
that's the point. That's the
Okay.
point.
That's
After
what I'm trying to find.
again, Tom Teslick left us in a very good state. He had set the strategy. He had hired Homely Towers, and we were on a path. I think the next month, April 2017, there was a public hearing in this room about 2 proposals. One was Irving Park, one was 580 feet, I guess, behind West School.
Mhm.
And a lot of people turned out and they made the point, why are you trying to solve the problem here when the problem's up in the north? And Homely Towers went away, saying, well, if that's what you want us to do, we'll do that. That's when I think in the spring of 2017, Rob Malazzi and Tom Teslick asked St. Luke's to host the tower for probably the 8th time that they had ever been asked. Carriers had always asked St. Luke's School to host a tower in that part of town. And St. Luke's said no. And that's when Keith Ritchie stepped in and began to talk to Homely Towers, and they ended up signing a lease, which I didn't know the negotiations were going on. When I took office in November, about a month later, Keith announced he had a lease with Homely Towers. And Homely Towers worked on that tower. Took 5 years from the signing of the lease to make it operational. Verizon has just gone operational. AT&T has gone operational. To some extent, we need to understand what T-Mobile's strategy is. T-Mobile used to be very aggressive. The Silver Hill Tower was T-Mobile initiated. The Country Club Tower, T-Mobile initiated. And then, before the merger with Sprint, T-Mobile, a lot of people who switched to T-Mobile are very happy. My son in Greenwich switched to T-Mobile. So I know a number of, anybody have T-Mobile? Why not? I actually, because of Verizon is telling me that, they were not, they literally disappeared. Like 3 years ago, I said, let's become an AT&T town. Just say, everybody's going to use AT&T. The problem with that is when visitors come, they actually want Verizon and T-Mobile phones to use. But I think T-Mobile is better. My theory is because they have fewer customers calling on the same kind of infrastructure. They also share anyway. So, but
Mobile also
yeah.
lets you change your SIM card that's why a
yeah.
lot of people
Anyway,
have. So you get a lot.
this is a very complex
Kevin,
subject.
my question on this, and having read that, Tom's strategy was a good strategy. I'm not sure it's in today's environment. His strategy was make sure that you go to one, make sure you're selling all of the leases simultaneously to the provider, right? So that you can leverage him in the negotiation. If I took away from that presentation,
I don't think I get what you're saying, or I agree.
he said
Because-
hire basically an integrator of your property like Homeland, who will address all of the carriers at one time, right? So that you can leverage the carriers as opposed to being knocked off one by one by one.
No, I think, I think Tom, by the way, Tom's in New York City. I'd love to
Yeah,
have
we
Tom.
can call him.
I'd love to have Tom come up or get on a Zoom and tell you exactly what he thinks. because he was an expert. He became an expert. You don't write a memo like this without
No, you don't.
a lot
You
of
don't.
thought and a lot of effort. He his view was by getting the PNC rules changed and making clear what the town wanted, the carriers wouldn't come in and surprise us. And so they understand that. We talk to the carriers all the time.
Okay.
We talked to Harry Carey at AT&T. We talked to Ken Baldwin, who's the lawyer in Hartford for Verizon. I've never talked to T-Mobile. They've come in as a marketing matter. T-Mobile actually did something interesting. I forgot about this. Back when Altice wired the town for Altice owns Optimum, they wired the entire town for fiber. And then Sprint came along and said, we'd like to hang repeaters
Mhm.
on all your fiber. And they did that. They did it on Long Island. In fact, there's an article I may have sent to you because some people are criticizing that as not being effective. T-Mobile is defending it as it works. So one of the reasons T-Mobile may be better here, in addition to the macro sites they have, is because they have all the repeaters on all the Altice wires. I said to Verizon a year ago, when Frontier came in last year and wired the entire town for fiber, because eventually they're going to get rid of their whole coaxial system and replace it with fiber. I said to Verizon, why don't you do what Sprint did? Put repeaters on. They said, we don't do that.
Simple.
We don't do that. So, they have their own strategies. You can't make them do something. They still believe in macro sites. And, you can watch the presentation that was made to P&Z last October by Ken Baldwin. He said if once at that time, the Soundview Lane antennas for Verizon were not yet active, but once the Northwest Tower is built and once the West Tower is built, we would be approaching 90% coverage. One thing Verizon has done, they've got about 7 small cells in town. One is down on Pine Street. One is over by the Merritt Parkway. They're installing one up at the corner of Owen Ridge as it goes into, and those are designed as Tom explains here. Once you get the macro sites, you're going to go back and fill in some areas with small cells. That's what Verizon has done with like 6 or 7. Every time they do one, I get a package this thick that goes to the setting council telling us, and surprisingly, only one neighbor over on Old Stanford Road has raised any question about those small cells. Because again, the theory was we were going to have thousands of 5G small cells. They changed the strategy by changing their spectrum.
Question
I have
on
a
that.
question. Sorry.
Sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted, what is our contract with Homeland Towers?
Initially, they wanted a master lease on all town properties, including right of way. Ultimately, then Rob Malazzi decided, let's do it by location by location. So we have a relationship with them. We have a draft master lease that was never signed, but they've done a lot of work. For example, after they were hired, after they were selected, they spent the entire year 2017 designing a tower for Waveney Park. I ran in the summer of 17 saying, I don't want a tower in Waveney Park because Aquarian had said, we're taking we have to paint the water tank. We don't want to host. Aquarian pretty much tried to adopt the policy. We don't want to host cell towers anymore and sell antennas. When I took office and AT&T, who came in? Aquarian came in, the then CEO, and said, we heard you. We'll keep the antennas there. So that was a huge win for us not to have to
It sure
build a
was.
150-foot tower
Yep.
because it was going to compete with the 130-foot water tank. It had to be taller. You can look at the design and all the work that Homeland Towers did to design a tower that was never built in Waveney
So,
Park.
but we don't have a contract with them existing right now.
I think we have a relationship and a moral obligation. If Homeland Towers, if we told Homeland Towers to go away, I think they'd be upset. So we have a contract that, it's a services contract. They've agreed to design and build infrastructure to pursuant to the plan that they recommended. So
But the concern is that they are a tower company, so they're going to look at towers and recommend towers as opposed to looking at other options and other
again, well,
alternatives.
that's a fair point. You need to, as Tom describes in here, DOS, right? DOS was designed for skyscrapers. The reason there's so many antennas in Manhattan, because not only do they have antennas outside the buildings, every skyscraper has DOS antennas on every floor. It's kind of like
Stadiums.
I mean, that's what that's what
Malls.
first responders need to be able to have their communications devices work inside buildings. That's part of the issue. So, but DAS, back in 2010 or so, under Jeff Picard had Crown Castle come in and do a drive test. And at that time, they said DAS won't work in New Canaan. The only place is Wellesley, Massachusetts, which owns their power company and owns all their poles. They did a 30 node DAS system to improve their service. And but one thing they don't have all these hills and ridges that New Canaan has, right? It's a kind of a flat town.
But-
So, but
But
that-
the cell towers are also a problem with densely, with heavy trees and ups and downs, like valleys aren't dealt with by cell towers. as
one
well.
of the reasons they say DAS doesn't work is because of morphology, which means leaves, right? Weaker signals from smaller cells don't go through leaves.
Right.
So, and the carriers are not going to invest in something that doesn't work very well. The other thing, quite honestly, that I disagree with Tom, he wanted to put a height limit on of 100. We actually debated this in the town council. Remember, we passed the resolution. We debated a lot in the town council. We adopted a resolution when Sam and I were on the town council to encourage the Board of Selectmen to get more aggressive with their strategy. And there's a lot of debate about 100 feet. There's no question a tower that's 125 feet is better than a tower that's 100, because downtown here, we have antennas for Verizon, T-Mobile, and AT&T that are only 55 feet above the ground. I live on Elm Street. I get 1 bar service. That's not cell service when you live, eighth of a mile away from an antenna, because all the buildings in between block the signals. Our signals for cell service don't go like this. They go in straight lines. The best place to generate cell signals are on high, so that you're going to come down and catch everybody you're trying to catch. I'm not advocating, I just had a meeting that's happening in Westcog. Westcog has this big, ugly, it actually pre-existed most cell service is this public safety tower, but it's a huge 180-foot tower in the center of town, right next to the police station. That provides a lot of cell service. Same thing with Weston. Weston has a huge 180-foot tower in the middle of town. 200 feet, I think 200 feet from the elementary school. And that provides huge coverage because it's so tall. We compromised a lot in New Canaan, and Tom, I felt, compromised at 100 feet, because in some locations, although elsewhere in his report, he says 130 feet should be the maximum. But higher towers give you better service. The carriers will get what they can. They hate these slick sticks like the Merritt Parkway Conservancy required them to do. There's a lot of ugly towers along the Merritt Parkway. But now if you build a new one, we get what we got at Exit 38. A slim stick. The carriers hate them, but if that's all they get, they'll do it, because they can't put as much antennas on them. If you look at, now that they are evolving to 5G, they've gotten rid of 2G, and I think 3G is being decommissioned as well. So now you got 4G and 5G. But you look at these towers, they have all kinds of antennas to provide service. The slick sticks can't provide that, and they can't give them the direction that they want to give. But if that's all they can get, that's what they'll do. So we make compromises when we put restrictions on the carriers. But again, they want to service their customers.
And is that something that the carriers could provide for us? I mean, I don't know that anyone in the room has that answer, but if they come to us and say, if we put 100-foot tower here, you're going to get, this much coverage. If you do 125, can they quantify that? Is there a way for that?
I'm sure our engineers could say this is the improvement of being higher.
Right.
And again, I'm not advocating for 180-foot towers.
That's just
I
information.
personally, I think 125-foot towers in most areas, sticking above the trees, depending upon the topography. And also, we've made very clear, we don't want big branching towers like up in Vista. The carriers, especially in rural areas, they'll say, Richard Gere just agreed to put a tower on his property in Bedford because he supports first responders. In your rural area, people get practical and they say, well, I'm not going to get coverage. Up in Connecticut, they have no service. And they say, well, if I have to, that's what the people in Weston said. We want cell service. And the price is a 180-foot tower in the center of town. That's what they agreed to.
It's also one tower, right? It's taller, probably doing the business.
But it's also, they don't have a lot of other towers.
Other
Yeah.
towers, that's what I mean, like.
You know,
you could do
some of these
one
towns are so big
Big one, less than.
and so few people. The carriers, you know, are not spending money.
Well, who's
Um,
making the,
what-
who should the town be dealing with? Because the owners of the towers has changed through time here, right? Now it's financial companies that own the towers.
No.
Yeah, they control them.
No, tower companies in all cases. I mean, they're like REITs, right?
Yeah, they're like REITs.
They're like REITs,
That's my point. So I think the carriers probably love it. They put their antennas on it. They're not making a good business plan on the antennas. They move the antennas, go to a different tower.
Well, you know, first of all, providing cell service is a very expensive proposition when you have to buy the spectrum for billions of dollars
Right.
from the federal government. Then you have to put the antennas everywhere. One thing COVID did, it took the focus off the cities. The reason Verizon came back was because their base is in New York City.
Mhm.
Nobody cares about New York City anymore. They have all the infrastructure they need, and they're focusing on the suburbs where people want to work from home and stuff. That's why Verizon came to us last April.
Question for you about that, because now that they've bought all the spectrum and spent billions of dollars
Yeah.
and whatnot, and 5G actually travels farther at the lower waves
Right,
and whatnot.
right. It's-
Okay, then something has to be looked at to say, okay, what is really going to be effective as far as the size of the circle
Yes,
that it can serve? But obviously the size and the height of the tower is the key to that, and then the new 5G spectrum. So
Yeah, no,
it's simple.
that's why we should get some expert testimony about where the telecommunications industry is today, given, because they were going to build
Yeah. exactly.
thousands of small cells. As I said, 10,000 in the city of Dallas. And this is much cheaper for them to have spectrum to go, but they had to pay billions of dollars to buy that spectrum.
Right.
Kind of amazing. And part of it, they had to buy back from companies that had bought it, thinking they were going to do satellite television, and they never did. So
How tall is the water tower?
Water tower is 130 feet tall.
Yeah.
And there's 5 carriers on there. I'm not sure who the other 2 are really, but and all of our public safety radio.
And can you briefly describe, without getting too much into it, what occurred with the Pudding Hill Road, why that didn't move forward?
Well, Verizon had looked for a long time to do something in the north, as had AT&T. Again, everybody approached St. Luke's School over and over, because they're the only institutional property up there in the northeast center corner of town on a hill. You always want to be as high as you can. And that's the highest, Soundview Lane is the highest point in town. What was the question?
What
happened
why
to
did
Pudding Hill?
not move forward?
You know, for a long time, they looked at the Clark property, which is 23 acres the town owns on Upper Smith Ridge. We were going to build a firehouse there at one point, or a 4th school possibly.
Police shooting range, you name it, boy, everybody
Anyway,
got their eye
Well,
on
again,
the
the
property.
Clark property is kind of off the table, but Verizon very much wanted to build a cell tower on the Clark property. And then somehow or other, after Grace Farms bought the 77 acres, the owner of the 4 acres that Grace Farms didn't own somehow got a lease with Verizon. And to me, they were just trying to get Grace Farms to buy their property. In fact, that's when I first got involved with Grace Farms. I saw what was happening, that this guy was trying to hold them up, and they ultimately bought the property. But Verizon, one important thing back then, going back to the early days when we were going to these meetings, the FCC rule says you couldn't, licenses were given out by state. So AT&T might have A in New York State and B in Connecticut, and vice versa so the Vista antennas originally couldn't shine in Connecticut. They had to point them into the ground so they wouldn't come into Connecticut, because they literally would conflict with the signals of the other carrier. That somehow that changed.
Interstate commerce.
And I'm not sure what exactly changed, but something changed.
It was an interstate commerce law or rule.
Right.
It was a rule.
So that was one of the things. Over time, things do change, and that was a significant change to let people are now getting somewhat service from that Vista tower. But those were the old antennas that didn't go more than a mile and a half. The new spectrum with 5G may come down. So, you know, one thing we have to understand is how much does this new spectrum help us have fewer towers? Someone said, well, let's wait to get the Northwest Tower built before we decide what to do with
Right.
lower on the west
In
side.
terms of that property, so it's Grace Farms, there was a 4-acre parcel that then ultimately was bought by Grace Farms, but there's still the Clark property that exists.
But the Clark property is not going to be touched,
Why?
partly because of wetlands. Partly because of, it was given by the Clark family as open space. Primarily, there's 7 acres in back that Judy Neville tried to develop or sell off to a developer. We lost that lawsuit. A lot of history about the Clark property.
North School.
We're going to do North School up there.
But I feel like
Yeah,
that's a
right.
common theme because we talk about the Clark property and then we talk about the nature center that was also deeded and it, you know, can only be passive recreation. And it seems like there are other parcels that, and I know you've been down this road 1,000 times, but I mean, to the layperson, it seems like there are parcels that still exist sprinkled through town that maybe we,
Not many that are town owned. In the north,
Right.
there were very
They're
few that are
trust
town
owned.
owned.
Right? There's a lot that are trust owned.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And
can
deeded.
those deeds be
No,
modified?
I mean, this is.
No, and the
it's
land
not
trust.
just, you know, it's land trust type and other kinds of trusts. And so they're deeded and this is how they're getting around things like the rule against perpetuities and
Mhm.
that you learn in the first year of law school is because they go through a trust and the trust has,
Most land trusts don't want to put cell towers on
Yeah,
their
and
property and they're
so-
afraid their brand is going to be destroyed if they,
so.
so.
You had
Yeah.
previously mentioned in one of the hearings that there were 5 sites that you were considering for cell towers during this last thing. And I was wondering what those are and what the status is of all those negotiations.
They're laying out, well, not 5 sites. We've been searching for the east side for a long time.
I know.
We had discussions going, Homeland Towers had discussion going on with the cemetery.
Cemetery.
And
Cemetery was one.
Huh?
So the cemetery is one of them. What are the other locations?
Lakeview Cemetery. Um, I mean, there weren't active discussions going on.
I thought
Homeland
that's what you
Towers
said
was
during
looking,
the-
but yeah,
Okay, I thought you said during the one of the town council meetings that there were 5, there was discussions about 5 area sites in town.
well, I think
That goes
was
back to
referring
the old map.
Okay.
The original Homeland Towers talks about 5 locations,
Mhm.
north,
With those.
northeast, northwest,
Yeah.
west.
Yeah, I wasn't
some
referring to
place
that.
east.
Yeah,
You know,
I-
people were saying, well, let's wait and see what kind of coverage we're getting from the exit 38 Merritt Parkway towers. First of all, AT&T is the only one that built their 140-foot slick stick. Verizon has permission to build one, but hasn't built it yet.
Seen that one. Yeah, that wasn't what I was talking about. During one of the meetings we had just this fall about the town council, he mentioned negotiating with several private property owners and various things.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're talking about the west. We talked to Country School.
Hmm.
We talked to Winter Club. We talked to the Camp Playland or whatever the name is.
Yeah.
When I say we, Homeland Towers talked to some. I talked to the Winter Club. I talked to the Country School, head of school. We-
Glass house?
No, Glass House is a historic Federal Register property and you can't put them near Federal Register properties. And that's why the Camp Playland is actually in Stanford. It's not in, the driveway's from New Canaan, but the property is in Stanford. And they have a huge amount of property over there. They could have, and that would help North Step. By the way, the carriers also don't care about town boundaries. They're trying to
Yeah,
cover
sure.
their customers in New York State as well as in Wilton. They don't care about what we want. So, but the point about who we talked to, I think, and the Land Trust has Davenport Ridge. And Land Trust policy was maybe we can do one. If we ever get to the point where you really need a location, because they have 74 properties around town. But they were very leery and they didn't know that the board would approve it.
And
Out
what
of the
about
5
Grace?
of these.
And by the
on
way,
this
the carriers
map,
did not
how
wanna
many
do it.
Have we done? I mean, how many are in the works or for these circles?
Well,
In the study?
Northwest has been approved last December by the siting council and is under construction. They're waiting until there's some kind of animal goes away for the nesting for the summer and then they will start up again in September. And that should be built like first quarter of 24. So we have Northeast operating,
Mhm.
we have Northwest under construction. And but we don't have, I really should emphasize. Verizon still has their request pending for the west location. We have to be careful not to tell them to go away again. So
And this is a request through Homeland Tower.
through Homeland Towers, because
right,
they're
for
the ones.
For that current tower.
They're the ones, Homeland Towers went to them and said, we think, actually, you'd have to ask Ray Brigatti, and I suggest you have Ray Brigatti come in and talk to you for Homeland Towers. I don't know how the conversation started, because it came as a great surprise to me to have Verizon show up last April. And also, as I've said before, they said we have a funded tower. I'd never heard those words before. Normally they'd say, we'd like a location, we like this location. If we get funding in the next 2 or 3, 4 years, it was always kind of like out in the future. This tower that they propose is funded in their budget, which is a huge, and partly again, because of COVID. They care about the suburbs now. That's where people want to work from home. And there's plenty of infrastructure in New York City. So they're,
From a Verizon standpoint, what's funded is the antennas that are going to go on. the
yes, yes, it's in their budget. Right.
Okay.
But, we'll get back to what you were. Again, when we look around the north, the west side of town, the carriers weren't interested in Davenport Ridge. So, it may be a location we can offer them, but if the carriers say it doesn't work for us, they're not going to do it. And workforce means in terms of what they're trying to do with their coverage, given where their customers are. They consider North Stamford as important as Decatur. They're not looking to serve only Decatur. They want a tower that's going to serve their customers based upon where the other towers are.
But then we'd be giving up our town land to help them serve customers in other towns. That doesn't seem like a very advantageous thing for the town. of
Oh, no,
Decatur.
in some ways, when we built Silver Hill Hospital, we were helping Wilton more than we were helping.
Right.
Again, we didn't initiate that tower.
Mhm. But we'd be initiating this.
Well, actually, I take that back. Dick Bond went to first to the North Water District Water Company and asked if they would host it. They said no.
Mhm.
They asked Silver Hill Hospital, and Silver Hill Hospital said yes. Took 15 years to get it built from the time Dick Bond asked that. And but they wanted to be good neighbors. And that's a
think the
tower
way- the way
right in the middle of a hospital campus.
They're gonna look at it as
When I
how
first met the CEO,
how many people they can benefit from it, and we're benefiting from the fact that we're gonna get a funded tower because North Stanford will get benefited.
well,
too,
actually,
people.
no,
But North
that's,
Stanford refused to build one. They proposed-
Right, but we're gonna get it
Well-
because they need, you know what I mean? If it was just gonna serve a corner of New Canaan, they're not gonna build it.
no, exactly. And that's the same thing with we desperately wanted a permanent public safety tower, and Stuart Salvini went to Stanford. Aquarian agreed to let us put one on the water company property, which they rarely do. Aquarian rarely wants to accommodate cell towers on their property. But it was in Stanford, right over the line. The city of Stanford turned it down, even though it was only going to be an 80-foot public safety antenna. So we have a temporary solution with a family that has sold their house to have coverage for our first responders. Radio in a vehicle is stronger, in a police car or a fire truck is stronger than a handheld. There's parts of Northwest where a policeman would get out of his vehicle and his handheld would not work. That's a dangerous situation for a first responder. So that's why we feel it's so important to have that public safety tower. And that was the primary motivation, to find a location for the public safety radio.
So that's been solved.
In
Well-
that area, yeah,
Mhm.
we believe, or will be.
Yeah, will be
in the
something.
future, the other deal is, using the vehicle as a transponder, right, to pump the power, right, from your Motorola, to the vehicle Motorola radio as a repeater. So there's some work to do there, but
But that only gets to the first responder out. It can't get a person to the first responder, right? Because if
no.
you have no self-service in your house, wherever they are, and they're getting out of the car,
Yeah.
how are they, they get,
It's a separate band.
I'm just trying to understand how this
You're
works. So if I'm
working-
in my house with no cell service
Yeah.
and the first responders trying to find me,
A lot of
How
the
does he
first
find it?
responder radios right now are running at 800 megahertz,
Mhm.
weight, which is lower than all the cell phone stuff.
Mhm.
It's still line of sight. It's not like when I was a kid and we were at 143 megahertz and the thing wrapped around every hill and nobody was ever out of service, but they took that away.
but I'm still confused. How do they find me if I don't have anything?
The first responders are
Just-
the other first responders. It's not them trying to.
It's not,
shoot like-
right, but I can't call 911.
But they're
With
going to.
You can't.
Right,
I'm not-
but I'm trying to understand what,
once-
so
once
the
guys-
issue is I get the,
Radio system,
Yeah.
That's one antenna.
Yeah.
That's one conversation.
okay,
We're
but
having a
there's,
separate conversation about cell service.
Yeah.
So it's two different antennas, two different frequencies. They're kind of mixing them together.
Public service radio is going to be a different conversation.
But
yes,
But the first responders, especially the ambulances, use cell service Because, police cars have laptop
Right.
and that gives them
Mobile data terminals.
mobile data. So, so the first responders do use wireless devices which require cell service in addition to their radios. So especially the ambulance. The ambulance wants to be able to have connectivity with the hospital immediately and be able to get information and know what's going on with the patient, that kind of thing. So. But they both carry both AT&T and Verizon because historically they both didn't work in all parts of town. Interestingly enough, again, I go back to the notion of why not T-Mobile. I fail to understand why T-Mobile has a 20% of the market when they have a pretty good service, partly because I think they have fewer customers.
And
But just so I understand, I just want to make sure I'm understanding that emergency tower, that situation, that stopgap. That you said.
For the Northwest,
In the Northwest.
Yeah.
Is only for first responders to talk to each other.
Radio.
It is
Public
It's
safety
nothing
radio.
to do with a person in the house being
That's
able to
right.
call.
Well, no,
911 and all that.
to
That's
me,
what I thought.
when we talk about public safety, there's two aspects
Mhm.
because first responders also want to use cell phones. I'll give you a good example. When a young child was backed over and John DeFederico was up there on the location, they don't want to say things over public safety radio. Everybody hears everything you're saying. So there's some things you don't want to talk about on a public safety radio. You want the confidentiality of a cell phone signal.
For the ambulance, it's a HIPAA issue.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So
So,
Just-
Kevin, you keep going to T-Mobile. How covered is the town in T-Mobile? How much of in the Northwest? What's the coverage in the Northwest?
again, T-Mobile has ubiquitous service. The other thing is that they're playing a little bit of game on us though. They say they have 5G. They have a lower level of 5G.
lower frequency.
It may be all people need. AT&T and Verizon are trying to give you a super highway delivery on 5G because 5G is going to do remarkable things, based upon.
Well, you're. We're really searching for coverage here, right? And
Well,
quite
we still,
frankly, we don't even really know what coverage we have in different areas of town.
well, quite honestly, that's why Centerline drive test is 2014. That's a long time ago. As far as VCOM, they said if we're going to do a drive test, you have to simulate what that Northwest tower is going to give you because it won't be operating.
Fine,
And you can put antennas up on a crane
I understand.
to simulate it.
Yep.
But because if you're going to do a drive test, you want it to be as complete as possible.
How tall is that Northwest Tower?
My guess is 120 feet. I don't recall.
have we found out at the siding commission hearings, do they state what the coverage area they expect to be for that? I know it was a contested tower, so I'm sure they must.
That whole file is not available online, the siting council. So you can look at the propagation maps that AT&T and the Verizon showed them. And so all that's there. I mean, I think, again, my thing I'm trying to understand is whether we're seeing now the beginnings. First of all, like 4 months ago, when I asked, or maybe 5 months ago, I asked Ken Walden, do you have 5G antennas operating yet? And he said no. But then I get all these reports coming from, everything coming out of the siting council. Lawyers have to send to the first selectman. So I get these reports of the antennas at the country club have been swapped out for 5G. So the water tower has been, some carriers, not all of them, because they all go and do their own thing. So they are swapping out antennas, decommissioning 3G and adding 5G. And that's going to be a significant change. Now, is it going farther? That's what we need to understand. I believe it is, but I haven't seen any data yet because I'm not sure when they approve. That's interesting too. When those locations were approved, they weren't simulating 5G.
Right.
So that's kind of interesting that,
So, I mean, that study should be
Right.
redone with 5G
Right.
to
yes,
see
yes,
if we're getting expanded coverage or not.
right.
It's 6
But-
years old.
Here, I was
Well,
trying
yeah,
to speak.
One thing I,
Yep.
Sorry to interrupt you. Is it possible to update the coverage? What does it entail? Is it a question of cost or? Because I mean, they since 2012, I mean, like, and as you mentioned, it's more a guessing game to know like what is a real 5G improvement or not, and It's just a question.
Yes, well, that's why we were proposing to do a new drive test. We did a drive test in 2010 with Crown Castle. We did the center line drive test in 2014. We haven't done one because, and again, the big change was COVID. Suddenly the carriers were interested again. They were only focused on New York City and the densely populated. And by the way, 5G was only going back 4 years. I would ask, when are we going to get 5G? They say, you're not going to see it for a decade. Now, all of a sudden, the world changed because they changed spectrum, and they also, because of COVID, they're paying attention to the suburbs.
And why did we choose Vicom to do this study? What made you choose Vicom to do the
It
study?
was recommended by Homeland Towers.
All right.
You know, I trust Homeland Towers. You can say what you want. But they've done many towers in the Northeast. They're based in Danbury. They do in Long Island. They're a tower company. Granted, if there's another technology, we ought to be talking to another company, but they are a tower company, and the carriers so far are spending their money on
So I
towers.
just wonder if it isn't smart to do an RFP to look at other options and other people who may have other technologies as opposed to using the contractor of a tower company
Well,
to do
when
the
I
study.
spoke to VCOM and actually, I think who was somebody on the town council was claiming they weren't independent. Their list of clients, as far as municipalities and counties and, is very broad.
Right.
They're not, they all do work for the carriers because, carriers need engineering studies as well. But VCOM is a very, very prominent Northeastern company. Look at their list of clients. These
But
are-
there are other ones out there too. I didn't.
Yeah,
know
that might
there are a
be.
bunch of them that
There
come
aren't
up.
that many. I mean, there are, I don't know how many, but
Yeah.
not on Zoom.
So it might be the opportunity, to use the power of the market is to get a request for analyzing that, right? We have nothing to lose, I think. Even better, we might get some people, and I know a few, but we could compare them to see what type of quality of study they can bring, right?
Well, we could issue an RFP, but it's not as though for a $12,000 study, it's not as though this is a big piece of business. They're coming to do a drive test in the community.
But it's
Well,
important
this is-
information, so we'll make sure we're getting good information.
Yeah, the information is really important, though. I mean,
Sure,
understanding the base of where the town is today is pretty important. I think.
absolutely. But
Right, of
again,
what the
I
coverage
have,
actually isn't who's it.
I
who
have
it's
no
from.
doubt about the independence of these people.
Right.
The fact that, maybe we have a choice of two or three.
Yeah.
But
I don't think maybe it's necessarily an independence issue. It's more like a more recent analysis, right? Like updated compared to a decade ago. So that's where.
no, but that's the point. A drive test.
Study, but I don't know.
What's a
that we
more
need-
recent analysis, which is what we're all talking about?
Yes,
Yeah.
well,
Right.
a drive test is they drive every street and they measure the signals for all the three carriers, and then they give you a report.
I just think it's I feel like we have an obligation to do an RFP and to come up with what we really want them to do and get cost and look at different bids and look at different companies and their capabilities and look at their qualifications before to me, this is kind of the baseline of what this whole commission is going to be deciding and looking at.
We can issue an RFP.
What?
You're exactly right.
Yeah, I think this is our starting point. I would like to make sure we all
We-
feel
we know
comfortable
where we're
with.
starting.
what it
We
is,
need
yeah.
to know where we're starting, or we don't ever know where we get to.
Yeah.
If we have. a
But do you,
problem.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, if there's even a problem, let's find out where we are.
Kevin,
Right, but they're capable of
I
telling
think
us on the
I
towers.
think the que-
Yeah, but this is
Kevin, I
a
think-
company's company. I just don't know that.
I mean, that they're a vendor, and
I
you
think
know,
the
they're-
question is,
but
you're
they're
the
actually a
procurement.
profession.
this is
You
what
know,
I
these-
mean,
these are
unless we haven't
licensed-
considered, and they
These are
work
licensed
not only for
engineers.
Homeland
They
Towers,
Yeah.
or industry.
So going forward then, Kevin, if our commission made a recommendation to the selectmen and the Board of Finance that,
Board of
we-
Finance has nothing to do with this.
okay,
got
that
it.
that we asked the Board of Selectmen to reissue an RFP to 3 people. And if we could get that information back, then we would make a recommendation back to you that we would think that one of these would be the prime candidate. Consensus, nods.
What?
Would that work?
If you want to do an RFP, we can do an RFP.
Because
Yeah.
my feeling is we seem to have come to a consensus that we need a baseline to understand the issue before we can credibly make any further recommendations to anyone about anything with
100%.
respect to this. So therefore, to do this in an expeditious manner so that we can get it done before the leaves are off the trees.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Which is important.
Thank you.
We've skipped on the agenda to.
Well,
the
we
drive
have,
test,
but no,
right, but that's okay. That's all
okay.
right. That's all right. Well, Kevin,
It's
you,
just a question. We
you're
could
the-
bring this up as a motion and a
no,
minute.
that's right. Kevin's the procurement agent for the town,
Agreed.
right? And I think we've got a bigger problem in the town if we don't trust our procurement agent to go buy something in an appropriate manner with the proper controls around it, that they're going to be independent. They're going to give us data that we think.
What I wouldn't want to do
et
is
cetera.
bring some of them out of state like we did with Centerline. Have someone fly across the country with
It's, I'm
equipment.
just.
It's unnecessary.
I'm-
That took forever too. I was,
Yeah,
they did a nice job, but
took forever.
it was nuts.
I think that's the one thing that I would caution, or the only pause I have about it is if there's enough, I could understand that Homeland Towers recommended this company to us, but they're also work with different ones. So all the time, I get asked to recommend people other. So if there's a basis for not trusting them, that's one thing.
Yeah.
If an RFP is going to delay this by 6 months or a year, I think
No.
that's a different question. I
could
think, I
issue-
guess that was the
We could
question I
issue an
have.
RFP in 2 weeks if I had the time.
Okay.
Thank you,
Or
sir.
If
I
someone,
don't think
if
it
someone,
takes a lot of time.
I
guess
don't know. like,
August
if
is not the
we're
greatest time
looking
for
at
us.
say-
And I'm not trying to say I don't trust VCOM. I just think this is such an important baseline that we should do an RFP and see who the competitors are and to see what the process and make sure we like the RFP and we know what we want them to study and what information we want to get back.
Right.
Before
See, I
we
think
just-
I think that's important as well, is the content, what will give us a good baseline in order to
Yeah.
go off.
we
of.
could also hire 2 of them and see, compare the results.
So Kevin, if we do the RFP, what do you think an estimate on the effect on, how much would it stretch out the process?
No,
Well,
no.
well, again, by the time you select someone, it only takes a couple weeks for them to come in and do something generally. So
There are apparently enough of these, drive study outfits out there that
Oh, I don't doubt there's other people that do it, but if you hire VCOM or whoever they are,
Yeah.
you could probably have them starting 2 weeks from now. But if you do an RFP, is it going to be 3-4 months to go through that whole process, have bids and?
you
That's
raised
the
a good point.
question.
You raised a good point about leafs on. It's better to do a drive test with leafs on than leafs off.
Needs to be done by mid-September,
Yeah.
Yeah.
to the end of
By
September,
30th. It's got to be done by September 30th.
Agree.
Yeah.
or earlier.
Lose a whole year. I mean,
That's-
That's
exactly
ridiculous.
right.
And that's, I guess that was
Can't
my
let
only
that
concern
happen.
is that,
We have
is there
till
enough?
mid-October before the leaves really fall off the trees. So the peak tree sleep was. the
But
peak
you're
is in
changing the trees,
mid-October.
like once they start turning and once they start
Right.
falling, it's
I
different.
think.
Well, again, I don't need, we can work offline on this. We don't. need-
Yeah, no, I think we can work offline. Can we,
As long
can
as
we
you
have,
want.
yeah, can we have somebody from
Sure.
the commission work with you to
Sure.
do the right RFP in terms of content and quality?
Sure.
And you're the procurement agent. You'll buy it in the right manner, I'm sure.
Okay.
Okay. I have a couple of other questions about it. I still don't understand the market channel that municipalities use to get coverage in their area. I mean, I understand we're all dealing with towers right now, but we're using Homeland Tower as an expert. The market has changed a lot since we started using Homeland Tower back in 2012 or 12 or 14 or whatever it is. And the reason I say that is you've got American Tower that owns 40,000 towers. You've got Homeland Tower that owns 400. Right. I mean,
Well, keep in mind-
do we have the right guy looking for being our agent for what we're looking for? We're looking for coverage, right?
We're looking for people that will give you their time. American
Yep.
Tower is a big company.
Yep.
And I suppose you're going to deal with some regional guy who may, the reality is.
I don't know who we do it with. I presume.
At
you
this
do.
point, well, again, I think that I recommend at your next meeting, you have Ray Vergati come and explain where Homeland Towers is in terms of, because I think they've done a lot of work for us. Some of it on the come, some of it was
Mhm.
wasted money they never got paid
Mhm.
for, such as the
But I-
waving.
I guess I still think we need to first find out, these are tower companies, and I guess I'm still stuck on, is that what we need to
Exactly.
have coming to do a presentation to us? I'd rather find a company that can do all different kinds of technology and
Well,
present to us
When
all.
you
the
say
options.
all different kinds of technology, I mean, Crown Castle and American Tower, but Crown Castle came in here. The big companies They will do DOS in some locations. They
Sure.
said DOS doesn't work in New Canaan. Or at least the expense, you're not going to get, we had this debate with the Utilities Commission back then and also P and Z. You know, if it's a question of cost, you know, for maybe for $13 million, we could build a super duper small cell. But who's going to pay that $30 million? Right? Versus
The numbers are a lot higher than that.
versus what,
Yeah.
what's the alternative? If macro sites are what the carriers want, and there's no issues, again, my view is strongly 900 feet from a school raises no issues. If you think there's an issue, the issue is with the phone, not with the tower. I don't know anybody who doesn't have one of these in their pocket.
And
So.
I think
I
it would
think
be.
that's a
That's
different
a
issue.
whole new,
The other
the health
technologies
aspect of it's a
as
whole
well.
different issue.
No, but that's the issue is if macro sites,
That's big,
why
but it's
are
not
we
gonna
opposed to
come
macro
in.
sites? Because of
We'd understand that.
aesthetics,
I don't think you're gonna get-
you know,
Well, there's aesthetics and there's health,
aesthetics and health and
aesthetics and health. And I don't know where we are on health.
well, that's another subject that
Right.
Tom
But it's another
addresses,
subject,
Tom
exactly.
addresses here and there's nothing. You know, we started hiring this Harvard School of Public Health expert who's retired and now works for a firm called Gradient. He's on these international committees, you know, everybody, so he's written a sort of a white paper. You can cite things from France or other places, some pretty crazy things. But the rest, you know, the rest of the world is ubiquitous with cell service. And then you can also weigh the issue about Wi-Fi in the classrooms. You know, describe to me the difference between a Wi-Fi signal in a classroom and a cell signal coming from 600 or 700 or 800 feet away.
Power.
Oh.
And, you know, the last thing we want is to take the Wi-Fi out of West School. But in France, they don't allow Wi-Fi in elementary schools.
Which is a bit telling as well.
Some people, you know, tell me they turn the Wi-Fi off in their house at night. I've never thought about doing that, but some people do.
Well, there's no doubt there's a controversy on how much exposure people have to higher power radio waves.
Well,
Right. And there's standards that are set for it, right? And the standard is 1,000, and I don't remember what the units are for it.
you know, Greenwich Hospital has a cell tower attached to the building, 180 feet tall.
Well, it all depends on
Philadelphia
what.
Hospital has a cell tower in the middle of their campus.
It all depends on what it's broadcasting and what the power level is it's
Mhm.
And
broadcasting.
that's
what it all
right.
depends on.
There's actually a
You're
theory.
you're absolutely right. This is the waves, the electromagnetic waves that we are broadcasting, and that's make a big deal. I mean, there's weapon that are done with electromagnetic wave, right? I can literally fry your brain if I put the right power and the right direction. So it's not a simple answer, and then we can also analyze that for sure.
Well, this is just another factor that I think is important for us to understand of what is the baseline power that we're willing to put up with, and do we have
Yeah.
that when we add this kind of equipment to a site, whatever kind of equipment is we decide to. So when we add the West Tower, we're adding something to an ambient amount of power that everybody's walking around with. You're walking around with it right now,
Right.
right?
Well,
In
And
your
that goes
pocket.
back,
So am I.
and that goes back to a thing that's called SAR, specific absorption ratios.
Right.
Okay, and there's a European spec and a North American spec.
Right. But
And if you,
I think
folks,
we.
if you haven't
want-
heard, if you haven't done, look up SAR, specific absorption ratios, and look at what those numbers are. And how it's implemented on a cell phone.
Yeah, one of the things that the Harvard professor would say is that, you know, the standards the FCC has, I mean, they're thousands of times less than anything that could be dangerous. So you really have to,
Well,
and on the other hand, the FCC has exclusive jurisdiction in this area to say what. can
We
be-
understand that.
That could be, but my question is, I don't think we know what our level is today in a lot of places. And as we add stuff, I think.
That's a
Well,
it's-
we can measure. We talked
I
about this with
think-
the town council. We talked about having an engineer come in and test for SCC compliance. that's something we could do as part of a tower, say an annual test to make sure they're in FCC compliance. But the FCC standard is what's going to legally
Right,
govern.
but we're not doing that today, right?
No.
Do we know what, are we doing that anywhere in town today?
No.
No, okay. Okay, that's
It
just a
seems-
question. Do we have a baseline for what we're working from?
It seems to me, it's a different equation. I mean, at Keats Place and up on Ponus, right? Those are private owners. They make the sale, the tower goes in. right? And the siting council has said that they will not, entertain, the issue of power and health. And that's based on an FCC law, which is a federal law, which overrides anything that the state or
Yeah.
the town can do. In our case, where we're looking at some of these sites on town property, we actually control whether or not the antenna goes in.
Sure. And that's
And
what
therefore,
that's what Tom
by
advocated.
default,
Yeah.
we can solve the issue.
Sure. I would also know,
We can make our own decision.
Yeah.
But that's down the road after we get through finding out what our baseline is. Do we have a problem? Where is the problem located? What are the alternative solutions?
I'll give you an example though. The antennas on the Locust, 39 Locust,
Yeah.
where the Board of Education is, or the Frontier Building where
Mhm.
AT&T is.
Right.
There are condominiums that are 50 feet from those antennas.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think those people have any concern that their health is being.
Well, what's the number in their apartment? I don't know whether they should have a concern. Maybe
Yeah.
they don't know.
The penthouse is a $2.5 million condo,
Well,
and people live.
maybe it's worth a
But
million.
doesn't mean it's good.
Yeah, that doesn't-
I know, but the reality is, the library is 200 feet from the antennas at
Oh,
the
no
Frontier
kidding.
Building.
I mean, what we sit in New York City. when
Yeah.
our office
Yeah,
is
so,
pretty hot.
No, it's very-
People have
that's
to,
right.
this is a very serious issue. People have to really understand.
Yeah. Well, we've got the can on the antenna on the top of Oak Street, right between Dewey and Dr. Dale.
Before you hit the SAR, right? Yeah.
Oak Street and
Well, let's.
Oak
Yes.
Street and South Avenue,
Right.
there's a can.
No,
Okay.
let's keep moving. Okay, I just think understanding the health aspect is part of our commission,
Oh, I think
quite
so, too.
frankly. All of the utilities, quite frankly. And I believe that. we
Not a
need-
problem for tonight.
No, not a problem. for
And,
tonight.
and the Utilities Commission did that before.
And
The
it's
question
al-
is. has
It is
any-
in the mission statement of the Utilities
in the
Commission
mission
too. I
statement,
understand that,
exactly.
especially consider the safety of all of these. So yeah.
Right. And I think that's all the currently operating ones as well, not just the new ones,
Yeah, I
right?
agree.
And we've got some things that we've talked about that it would imply some of the currently operating ones may have an issue with.
Right.
Right.
How many have AT&T? All Verizon?
Yeah.
Isn't that surprising? The town is a Verizon. All of our town phones are
Well, let's-
Verizon.
We've.
And Verizon is the worst performing in New Canaan.
Yep.
Strange.
It didn't used to be.
Your perception, no, seriously.
Kevin, it didn't
used
used to be
bad.
though.
It did-
It didn't used to be.
It's gotten a lot worse.
It didn't used to be. It didn't used to be the worst performer. It used to be the best performer.
Well,
Verizon.
around the country it is,
Yeah, but in New Canaan, it used to be as well.
I used to, because even.
Mine
all the
used to
way
work.
Here to the city, it used to be because I used to.
Verizon used to work
get
here?
a Verizon air card.
Used to
You
work
live-
better than it does now.
Have
Where you
AT&T
live?
air
Yeah.
cards back. I used to go by when I get them at the office. I would always have to get the Verizon one because
Exactly.
AT&T I couldn't get.
I asked myself, why do I have Verizon? I don't know. It's inertia. So,
We gotta keep this moving.
but AT&T, that's why some people's perception of this problem is based upon what they're using. AT&T, you won't perceive the
Yeah.
much better.
I think what we ought to do is we ought to finish up here and get all the questions out on the table that we want to ask for Kevin. So.
The only
let's
thing-
start One end or the other. Why don't
No,
we?
just to that point, I just want to say a couple of things. Number one, I think you're right about the FAQ is a good framework. It's a good framework. The context you've provided, the questions we've raised all lay the right groundwork. I look forward to the commission subdividing into the right, into the groups to take this forward. And I think that's kind of where we're at.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I appreciate, all the context, the history, the work that was done here. It provides a good framework, but obviously things.
And
need
by
to
the way, I'd be
updated.
happy to invite Tom Teslick to come and talk to you because Tom is in New York City. He was a first responder
Mhm.
with the EMS. And he's
That's a good
and
idea.
he's biased against cell towers.
Mike? Anything?
I
Anything
just,
more?
I agree that we need to basically have another study done. It doesn't have to be from that particular company. Issue an RFP as quick as possible to the 3 or 4 companies that do that circle to tell us what the range is on the current 4G, 5G networks, which
Right.
are brand new. It could alter the circles as far as where we need service and not service.
Yeah.
And then approach it from the health and safety part of it. This is more dangerous putting this phone and walking around with in your pocket
Mhm.
than it is from that. And I know because I hiked today and it was in my back pocket, my hip hurts. And it wasn't the sitting on the
It's
phone
correlated.
every time I do that. So, I don't
The
know.
reality is, do you think Apple and Samsung think they have tremendous future liabilities from these devices? I don't think so. So. I like cigarettes.
Unaccustomed as I am to public speaking, I'm done.
You're done?
I'm done. Thank you.
Done?
No
Done,
questions.
Jamie?
Thank you.
I think, yeah, I think we need to get the baseline before we can move forward with anything. I feel like
I
until we know that, it's going to be hard for us to make any decisions.
I think we do need the baseline and I think we need to move expeditiously though, because we're gonna lose, as you
Agreed.
said, we're gonna lose.
Okay, can
That's-
I,
That'll
let
limit
me
time.
just finish this up then, and let me just ask you to clarify a couple things. There is really nobody in town that works on technology. It's us.
Yes, our IT,
Okay.
our IT head is our IT.
And there really is no organization save you that works on negotiating.
Nobody in town
this-
government.
Right, nobody in town government.
Nobody in
There is
town
no
government.
town government structure
Right.
that supports
Right. That's
this
why
particular stuff.
that's why this was, this
I got
was Utilities Commission domain at the time.
I got it. And Homeland Tower, from your standpoint, is the right marketing or approach to the cellular providers.
Done a
For,
great job for us. and I
getting
think-
their antennas put up on whatever structure that happens to be that we decide we want to use, right? Because the point is getting the antennas up. It's not building the towers.
Well, no, they build towers.
Right.
The antennas belong to the carriers.
No longer. They belong to American Tower.
No.
Oh, yes, they do.
No.
Verizon sold 11,000 towers to
But that's the-
American Tower.
But that's the tower. The antennas are always leases by the
I
carriers.
understand. That's my point. That's why Homeland Tower is providing that entrance to
Yeah.
deal with the carriers, right? Who built it?
Well, same thing. American Tower does the same thing. They build a tower. The carriers put their equipment on it. The carriers continue to own their equipment. When you sell the tower,
Right.
you're just selling the tower that has the leases with the
To-
carriers.
To Jamie's point, though, these are tower builders, right? They want to build a tower.
Yeah.
There's no contract for that. They want to build the tower.
I
so does
understand.
other
That's what I'm saying. So we
people who
can
want-
widen our scope
make
of what we're
money.
looking at. and who
Well,
we're
I
considering.
understand. But you have to-
My only point is you're convinced we're working with the right
I
person,
am.
which is a regional sized tower builder
Yes.
to help us design our network, which they've offered a design 2017.
Right.
Documented.
I
right?
think you should have them come in and talk to you.
One more person.
But why would we
Okay.
have a tower? I guess
Yeah.
I'm not sure what that accomplishes
Because
right
I
now.
think they
Well, again,
Well, some parallel paths. to
but the question is
anything else that-
compared to what? I mean, American Tower, Crown Castle, there's three
Right.
SBA towers, which has 400,000 towers around the world, right?
Yeah.
They're all big tower companies. Now, they also do DOS, but they only do DOS where it makes economic sense, so. But beyond that, what other technology are you looking for with the technology? That's the game right now.
Okay.
Towers.
I got it. That's the point.
Last comment.
That's the point. Karim.
Anything?
No, good. I think it's a good decision to update and have a fresh and unbiased view of the situation, right? That's the important thing. If we don't understand the problem, how can we use a solution, right?
Okay. Okay, I think that's it for the questions. Kevin, for you, unless you've got something else you want to tell us.
I'd like to understand what your other, first of all, I'm ex officio on this committee.
I understand. You
committee,
can
so-
stay all you want. I'm not throwing you out. I'm
But-
just not requesting you to do something else.
No, I want to see what other areas of utilities you want to work on, because we deal with the utilities all
Sure.
the time.
Sure.
So,
Okay, I think the thing we do next though is I think we need to pass a motion to ask to have the drive-by study completed by September 30th and you buy it.
Mm.
Isn't
And
it
we want
also the
somebody to
RF
participate in
Isn't
it.
it part of an RFP? Isn't the motion for an RFP to get to that point?
Yeah.
As part of that, right?
we perhaps first of all, and we can research how many others are in the area. We don't want to go to Florida
Sure.
or Colorado or,
No,
right? And just ask the other two or three firms to give us proposals.
Absolutely.
That's much quicker than issuing an RFP. This is a $10,000 to $15,000
yeah,
project.
and I think that's.
But I guess the RFP,
And then you can-
RFP lets us define the scope of what we want them to do.
Yeah.
That's my concern about that.
What is the?
But a drive test is a drive test is a drive test. Measure. The one thing we need to decide, how we're going to try to simulate that Northwest Tower because it
Mhm.
doesn't exist yet.
And
And-
I think that's an important fact. That's one of the things, that's why I was asking, do we have siting commission documents about the scope and
Right.
what that tower is going to
That gets
impact
into some
things?
expense because if you have to try to hang antennas up on a crane, it can be done, but it's more expensive.
I think we have to if we're going to have an accurate picture of what we need to solve for.
That presumes you're going to get that tower.
Yeah, it already passed. He said the building is trying to build it. Yeah.
That tower's approved
Okay.
and
Are they building? Are they?
they started their base work last November, December.
Okay, well, who wants to make a
Actually, it was
motion?
approved December,
Jamie, would you like to
January.
make a
I'll make a
motion?
motion. It's Janae, but yeah.
I'm sorry, Janae, I
It's
keep
okay,
saying
it's fine. Yes, I'll make a motion
I'll second
for
it.
an RFP.
No, it's not just.
Let's
the
get
RFP.
specific on what the.
Why don't we just
the
offer,
communication
as
is.
Kevin had said, why don't we just call?
Yeah.
The 3 or 4 companies that could be in this area. We're not paying travel expenses from Colorado. We're not paying all these
Yeah.
other things. Call them and ask them for a proposal.
Yeah.
And also have them include
And then
a
we'll sit
lift-
down with the proposals and you
lift or
decide.
whatever it is that would simulate, and you rent those by the day. So
Well, but it's,
for
but
the day, and,
it's some expense.
depending on the height of it.
Yeah,
And simulate that because it's not going to be done in time for September 30th.
yeah, we're gonna have to rush to get it done.
From them and then come back. So I'd be willing to work.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. I think I also want to make clear that whatever we ask these, we're asking them all to do the same thing. So we're comparing apples to apples as opposed to them all doing their own way of approaching it.
But a drive test, a drive test is a
Yeah,
drive test.
except for, well, I do think the fact that the Northwest Tower needs to be simulated, they might have different ways of doing it, so we could get different data.
We
So
can-
this is trying to make sure we suggest one way that there's consistency, so we're comparing the correct things to each
Can you
other.
simulate it or can you model it?
I don't know, however they do, I'd like them all to do the same thing, so we know what we're comparing.
Well,
Modeling
sure.
it, would be like, modeling it would just take the RF engineer's map and overlay it.
Mhm.
Okay, simulating it would be putting the lift up and putting a transmitter on the top.
I think we'd have to simulate if we're having a person drive around town to see where they get the signals from, so we probably need a simulation, right?
Well, that was the other thing is, if you take the model and you just overlay the RF engineer's map. Which
Yeah.
would be cheaper and faster.
Less costly, less aggravation.
But I don't know if this is accurate.
it's gonna be within.
Nothing is gonna be accurate until they put the tower up.
Right.
I'm just saying, I think,
Or should we
I
ask the
think that the
tower, if
RFP
we ask the companies that when we propose, say we're gonna this tower up, how do you recommend that we best simulate?
Give
the
us two
best
prices.
simulate that?
thanks.
Hmm.
Is the motion seconded?
I don't know who's made the motion
I
yet.
actually, but I would like to add that in terms of timing too, that if taking, if somehow it gets. that everything
Whatever
gets
the
done
option
by
is that we get it done
Yeah.
by September 30th.
And then VCOM has to give another price.
The real refresh, whatever there is.
Okay, so
Okay.
I will
Who's
make a
making a motion?
motion to inquire, right? I make a motion to get proposals from 2 other regional companies in addition to this one,
Yeah,
right?
That'll
In
work.
addition
Yeah.
to
right.
VCOM,
VCOM's proposal, I make a motion to gather, proposals from 2 other drive-by drive study, and they will give us 2 options. One is to actually simulate the Northwest Tower that is going up, and one is to also do an overlay,
the model.
a model
Model.
version of it. So we will have 6 proposals to review at our next meeting, August.
No, we
15th.
won't get it by
Needs
September.
to be done before that.
Yeah, we need, why don't I work with
Yeah.
you two?
Okay.
I
To-
second
As soon
that.
as,
I see.
okay,
There's, so to be sure, like, so we're going to have some,
Second,
a proposal that they will all match the different requirement that we have, right?
yeah,
There's one thing that I would like to add is the ability to have access to their data. Because that's the domain where I work, and I want to make sure that the data they are collecting, we have just visibility on it. I don't care the format, but I want to make sure that I can play with it.
That's
Okay.
okay, right, Kevin?
Sure.
We're buying the data,
We're buying the data.
right? If we paid.
I love that we have an expert on the committee to look at that data. That's great.
They're all very brilliant people.
Makes
Yeah.
sense,
Yeah,
yeah. thank you
exactly.
For that. Okay, so all
Yeah.
in, oh, sorry, all in favor,
Yeah.
it should be said.
Yeah,
We got a motion.
we got a motion on the
I
floor.
make the motion. We have a
First,
second.
seconded.
Jen,
All
let's
in
try.
favor? Aye.
All in favor?
Any
Unanimous.
opposed?
All opposed?
Joe's got us something.
No.
Unfortunately
Right now.
not.
It's no discussion.
Do we have any opposed? No.
No.
Okay.
And then
Okay, so that's 8-0, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think we're done with the discussion. I think what people ought to do is they ought to go back and think about what else they want to understand about our current strategy. Relative to what Kevin's told us and what the documents were. Okay, and then I think next meeting we come around again on this. Just as a refresh, what you've got, and let's stay on that. The last thing, then we passed our motion. The last thing we were going to do was talk about organization, I believe. And what I wanted to do was just give us some semblance of organization as who's working on the two major areas we've got are really power and telecommunications and two-way communications, internet communications, et cetera. And I think as opposed to divide up into subcommittees, what I'd like to do is kind of get a leader on each side of that. And then have basically everybody else bail in and help and be active in that. And so I guess what I'd like to do on that is, Mike, can you take the lead on power? Okay,
yeah,
Given-
power, gas.
given your background with Eversource, et cetera. And then Krista, can you take the lead on the cell phone stuff? Okay. And then the other thing that I wanted to talk about on this was, I think we need to understand and in some way get measurements of effectiveness of our utilities, specifically our power utility and our communications utility that we're providing to the people. And I don't know how to do it. And so I admit I don't know how to do it. So I just like somebody to bail in and think about it. And Karim, if you would do that, that would be
Yeah, I'll
very
do that.
helpful with your background. And your current employment. I think you've got a good background for doing that.
I'll do, thank you.
Rich, the one thing I don't understand though, these are monopolies. We don't have a choice other than.
No, but we do
Eversource.
have Kevin, we do have, I agree with you 100%, but that's the reason, we're not going to tell them what to do. We're just going to complain if we're not getting it treated as well as we should be getting treated and given the services our residents expect,
Correct, yeah.
which I think is our mission. And I think you need a measurement to get that. I think you need a measurement, and I think you need to go back and be able to say, we're not there.
Here are facts.
You do it within your DERG, you do it on an absolute value. Are we getting what we ought to get? And are we putting ourselves in a competitive position in the geography with respect to what is available to our citizens? I think on the internet right now, we're not. I think on the cell service, I don't think we are, but anybody could argue with me, of course, because nobody's got any numbers as far as I know. As far as what's available to how many of our citizens in what areas, et cetera.
Okay.
And that's what I'm asking us to go think about how to get to the bottom of. And Kevin, I would certainly appreciate all the input you give us. And
I'm trying to think of how we would go about measuring that because
The only way to measure that as far as quality of service, you can get the customer complaints, you can get all of the service things. The only time that a utility needs to step up is when there's an emergency, and usually that's when there's a storm. And then those resources are spread throughout the state. So it's a matter of how many resources you're able to acquire, how the town can work connectively with the utility in order to make it easier for them, to make it easier for us. In order to get restoration back on for power phone and whatnot.
right.
So that's the measurement. I mean, you really can't you really can't.
No, that's right. But
measure it
until you
differently.
understand that, you don't understand if you're being shortchanged or not.
But the other aspect of just seeing, if you
Right.
see sort of the resilience of the system and that if you,
Correct.
by looking at the data, understand the resilience of it.
Yeah.
And that conversation can occur away from the stress event.
And we could ask them.
There's measurement, there's basic measurement data,
Yeah, we can ask them to come. in and
that's just,
talk
that's
to
just sort
us.
of a baseline to make sure that we're not missing something.
Yeah, the other thing that you have to realize is this is a very, very,
Make it part of.
high growth tree area that we live in. No one wants to lose their trees. But they want their lines to stay up. So the problem is don't trim my tree, but have my line stay up.
Well,
You're
you don't need to put
Well,
it up, you can bury it.
Yeah, that was.
Yeah, wearing it.
That's
But-
$1 million a mile most of the time, but we're gonna look into that anyway.
That's what, yeah, and I would, so having lived just in Simsbury during the October storm where the utilities wouldn't even bother to come because we were such a mess that they fixed the rest of the state and then us because we were so bad. We had no power for 14 days in Simsbury, but that October snowstorm. that-
Simsbury.
Yeah, was, and we're very heavily trees and it was the same problem. Nobody wanted to cut it down. So that was one of the other things I was going to actually suggest for here is sort of the utility emergency preparedness and if that's something we would want to sort of just measure as a commission and
This is something,
It's a tough measurement. Every storm is different. One storm had 162 out of 165 roads in this town closed with trees down.
Mhm.
I know because I was here working it
Doing it.
and trying to
Yeah.
to clear it up for the company at the time.
So why
So-
don't
I
we
think
then?
of it more as troubleshooting, as sort of looking at where our weaker points are, sort of looking at the tree coverage, at the things that could, where we have stress points in the event of emergency, so that when we do have them, we're ready to respond. That was more of my thought on it.
Okay.
but-
That's
but-
what-
If I may, like, I think it's all the valid point that you made, but what we need to go is make decision based on data. So meaning, what's the probability of having a issue in such area on such a service? There's also the fact that we can also could potentially recommend some mitigation factor, right? Let's say if you're guaranteed, it's maybe a dumb example, but if you guarantee that a street is always losing power with a storm, either you cut the tree or you bury the line, but you do something, right? And that it's preventive. You don't need to wait to be in a crisis. And then you can see what's the cost of that. Potentially the cost is less expensive, even for the electric company, knowing that they are charging us an arm and a leg for the distribution. But the question is, have we done our due diligence? Have we looked at that? Do you know what's the cost? Or you know what is the risk? And where is it located in New Canaan?
Would we have a way to track which streets continually, which neighborhoods lose power most often, I wonder, or something to that?
They would have
There's
that
data. There's data for that.
That'd be interesting data to tell me. Yeah.
That's, the-
Where are weak spots?
Friends with them and have them come in and actually help us do it. Which
I think you would appreciate us looking at that.
like a terrific guy.
Terrific. Well, why don't we just, what we said we do is we kind of go through is what everybody wanted to do and make sure we were getting people kind of where they wanted. Bernard, do you want to start out on that?
Sitting on the end, I get that.
That's
huh?
what happens.
Yeah, I guess I circle for myself the water area.
Okay.
I'd have interest in keeping an
Okay.
eye on
Okay,
and the internet and media distribution.
okay. I think that's fine.
Good.
Okay, so you come back with what you think ought to be done in the water area with respect to measurement, and with respect to what's currently hanging fire.
Perfect.
Okay,
Good.
and then on the off time, I think we're gonna have kind of an all hands on deck deal with the cell phone stuff until we get that done. Okay, so I'm sure that Krista could call on you as well.
Done.
And then Janae, did I get it right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, and Janae, you'll be working on the cell phone stuff, which is exactly what you wanted to do, right?
Yes.
And Jill, you can work on the cell phone stuff, but I think you ought to just be the secretary.
No, I don't.
So you go ahead. Is the cell phone?
I would like to do cell phones, and I also, like I said, I'd like to work with Mike a little bit on just
Terrific.
more from the.
Yeah. And
disaster
everybody
recovery
can
and that
work
kind of
everywhere,
stuff.
quite
So,
frankly, because we're all
yeah.
gonna be voting on everything, right? So this is
Yeah.
just this is a focus. Sven?
So I'll go back and try and do some liaison work with my public safety friends. I'll talk to Amy, John, Albie, Russ, and of course, Tiger, because, DPW is also part of emergency response. Nobody can make it down the road until somebody puts a plow out there and moves all the logs out of the way. So I'll talk to those folks, respect to public safety radio for their two-way communication. And I'll also like to kick in on internet and resiliency based on our recent past history. Be happy to do that. Got some background there.
Okay, and Mike?
That's the two-way communication is important. Obviously, I'll lead the charge if you want me to with the energy,
Perfect.
electric, gas and whatnot.
Perfect.
But also the communication, talking to Mo's, the highway department and Tiger and
Sure.
whatnot. We needed them during storms
Mhm.
to bring the crews out to have the radios because the cell phones weren't working.
Mhm.
That cooperation was instrumental in getting things fixed quicker.
Okay.
So them not having that service.
Yep.
Up in Lost District or whatever, delayed a lot of things. So
A key question here is how dependent the EMS teams are dependent upon the towers, right? And their service
Well,
versus
so
just
I'll
the
talk
radio
to-
stuff.
I'll talk to Amy and, some of the folks and see if we can get that nailed down.
You saw my email with their
Good.
initial response.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We did.
Yeah, 516. Everyone,
So on the electric and probably any of the regulated utilities, that's my complete background. So
and Karim,
Yeah, so I mean, I will work over the different
The date.
horizontal, bringing
Perfect.
some quantitative economical measure to help to
any other input from the commissioners before we adjourn?
Thank you to Karim for
Awesome.
zooming in from overseas. Thank you.
It's very late for you right now. I was just thinking it's a
But-
very late night.
I believe what I found, just a side comment, what I found very exciting is that if we do our job well, it's very important for New Canaan and for the future citizen, right? If they know that we have at heart their concern and we communicate well on what we have done, I think it's going to be a very important in terms of the perception of New Canaan, but also the economical value of the home and the city, right?
Terrific. Thank you.
well said.
I'd take a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion.
Oh, thank you, Krista. Second?
I'll second.
Okay, great, Joe. Okay, we're adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your time, Kim.